Well, hello, everyone. Starting on time for another Substack Live, also streaming on YouTube and X for people who want to watch from there. I will be trying to monitor the comments on Substack Live for questions and comments, and I'll try to react to them. I'll try to go for as long as I can today because there's a lot to talk about. We'll post the recording later for people who can't join us live. Um, it's been a lot has happened since I've done one of these before, um, to say the least, especially the events of this past week. Has I think has really I think changed the zeitgeist in a very serious way. So let's talk about it. Let's reflect on where we are. Let's try to think about how we situate ourselves inside of all this place in history, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about history. We'll talk a little bit about um, the history of um, authoritarian movements, particularly in the early 20th century. There's a lot to talk about there. I write about that sometimes and think about that a lot, particularly the symmetries between now and then, which become starker and starker as the days go on, it would seem. So let's talk about Charlie Kirk. You know, there is a there is a thread out there that I find very worrying. I'm not going to try and draw any moral equivalence here, but there is but to the degree that I want to call out both sides, I do want to say that I do think there's a lot of irresponsible rhetoric going on, to say the least. Uh, and it's an understatement, actually, given what some people are saying. But I do want to say this, and some people will probably accuse me of directing blame in the wrong direction. But I think there's a really important truth about um, democratic culture and liberal values, and that is that this thing that we're doing, this democratic society that we want to live in, is predicated on the notion that we solve our differences in through peaceful means. If the threat of violence is present in political disputes, it always leads nowhere good. Therefore, the assassination of Charlie Kirk is a tragedy. It is an attack on democracy. And it honestly doesn't matter if Charlie Kirk supported democracy or not. It doesn't change that. Um, and I'm not trying to say he didn't. I'm not trying to legislate on his views right now. And in fact, I'm not going to do that because I think it's inappropriate to ever put a but after the condemnation of political violence. Although the moment makes it very difficult to not put to put a but there, not in terms of justification, but in terms of the political tribalism and the reaction to it, the very, very dangerous reaction to it, the incredibly irresponsible rhetoric that we're seeing come out of some figures on the right. Um, and and they're obviously feeding off of this incredibly grotesque and vulgar group of people, random morons on the internet that are cheering on and making light of Charlie Kirk's murder, which is just disgusting. I mean, these people have to understand that this is what fascists want, right? I mean, the like fascist forces in our society that want to bring an end to our democracy want you to cheer Charlie Kirk's death. That's what they want you to do, so they can hold that up as an example to justify their authoritarianism. Um, and so, I mean, even if even if you don't have a moral disapprobation for it, which you should, by the way, you should be morally outraged at any political violence. But even if you're looking at it from like a pure utilitarian perspective, I mean, and in terms of like what is good for you in a civil society, I would say that making light of something like this is just hurting yourself. You're giving your enemies ammunition, uh not just to come after you, but to come after everybody. So I, under no circumstances should anybody justify political violence in the context of a democratic society. And then, then of course, I mean, then of course the question comes, right? I mean, like um what are we to do in this moment? What are people to do that feel like attacked? What are the vulnerable people in our society supposed to do? Well, I mean, um, we need to politically organize and build political coalitions that can win elections, and can defend our institutions to ensure that those elections continue to be free and fair. And those institutions are very much under attack. Um, and and I think it's fair to question whether or not we're going to continue to have free and fair elections in this country. There's a lot of good work being done by people on the pro democracy front to try and defend access to the ballot box across the country. Democracy Docket is they're doing amazing work in the courts, trying to push back attempts by Republican Republican-led states to make it harder to vote across this country. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that we have to hold in our head, and even acknowledging that, right? I'm going to repeat this: political violence is unacceptable. Like, you're not going to save your democracy through political violence. You can only destroy democracy through political violence. So we're in a dark place. Um, but in many ways we're not in as unprecedented of a place as we might think. For those of us who are on the younger side, we haven't lived through periods like this before. The last period in the United States that you could compare to this moment um, is is the late 1960s, early 1970s, where we had a lot of political violence and political assassinations. So I mean, this country does have a history of this that has to be acknowledged. So there isn't, this isn't something that hasn't happened before. Um, but I would suggest that the 1850s, the late 19th century, the sort of move into the Gilded Age era is a somewhat more apt comparison to where we are today. And America did come out of that, right? And there was quite a bit of democratic, regeneration in the early 20th century. So there is reason to hope, right? I mean, we have relatively deep institutions in this country. The federal government is being damaged very badly, but we have state governments. We have large, powerful states like California, like Illinois, northeastern states, New York, that are, that they hold a lot of political power, and that is a reason to hope, to believe that there's enough institutional depth to basically hold us through the next few years, such that we can get to more democratic possibility. That said, though, from the perspective of the culture and our sort of politics and the people who make it up, I, it's a really distressing time, for those of us who care about democracy, because I would say that democratic culture is in serious decline, including on the left, and I'll unpack my thoughts about that, um, as we go forward. The thing is, we've been moving further and further towards this sense that every single election is existential, and increasingly that's true, and both sides believe that. I mean, most Republicans believe that if Democrats win the next election, it's the end of democracy, and obviously Democrats believe that Republicans represent the end of democracy. I believe that Donald Trump and the people around him are trying to end democracy. To be clear, so I'm not trying to both sides this, but I am trying to uh, frame the psychology of the country and how everybody thinks, and where we stand. I also don't want to bullshit you, right? I mean, history doesn't have many good examples for how you come back from this. Um, and I don't want to, I don't, and I don't want to be a doomsayer either. I believe that it is possible that we can turn this around, that it is possible that we can have democratic regeneration in this country, that we can rebuild institutions, that we can make them more responsive to the body politic. I think this can happen, but we're very far from a period of reconciliation and regeneration. I mean, the truth is, it's probably going to get a fair bit worse before things get better, and that's for several reasons. Most Americans today, and this is increasingly true among younger Americans who've sort of grown up in the political culture that we have now, view this as normal, that this is normal politics, that sending ICE agents with masks and cars with no license plates and deportation planes with no tail numbers, it's just a policy disagreement, right? Democrats might do it differently. Democrats might not have masks, and they might put license plates on cars, and they might put tail numbers on planes. It's just a policy disagreement. It's a different way of doing things. I mean, you have to realize most Americans largely see things that way, right? And then you have this politically engaged group of people, which most of you listening to me are, that would recognize these things as being serious problems for a democratic society. You can't have the government doing things with impunity. You can't have people acting on behalf of the government doing so anonymously, because if the law is broken and constitutional rights are abridged, there's no one to hold accountable if you don't know who did it. This is an obvious problem. I mean, obviously the right counters by saying the only way they can keep ICE safe is by keeping them anonymous. But that's just an example. I mean, that's just a let's not get into that right now. We can come back to that at some point. But I do want to I do want to just be very honest with you. Like we're not in a good place. Um, and the only saving grace that we have right now is that we have deep institutions in this country. That's our savings grace. That's our saving grace right now. That's the thing that's slowing things down. We don't have a political culture or a culture at large that is committed to saving democracy. I would even say the left isn't as committed to saving democracy as they might claim to be. Um, look. I'm quite. I get very frustrated at people on the left who are unable to get past whatever it is, disagreements over Israel, disagreements over neoliberal policies on the center left, or like the abundance agenda, or the populists on the left, or being angry at Mondami in New York City. Zoran Mondani is almost certainly going to become mayor, and you see centrist liberals basically saying there's no way we can coalition like this. And you have the populist left saying the same thing about like the neoliberal shills of the center. This is like that. That's not good. That there's this group of people that all actually make up a majority of the country, and could come together in a coherent democratic coalition to push things back, but are unwilling to do so unless one side gives up one of their sacred cows, or recites their shibboleths. That's just not. That's not going to work now, right? There does need to be a recognition, if you believe that our democracy is failing, that we're seeing the fascistization of the right, which we are, that we're witnessing authoritarian consolidation within the Trump administration. I mean, you just simply have to put like the priorities of maintaining the rule of law and democracy as your like core principles that you're going to organize around. And that has to be like your sense of highest purpose in this moment. If you're saying like, look, I'm not gonna I'll give you I think at this point, right? I'm not convinced that the Democrats have what it takes to fight this back. Like, part of me thinks that, let's say Gavin Newsom wins the primary, I think you get a bunch of progressives saying, well, I'm not supporting this, right? Or reluctantly, or voting for the Green Party, or whatever the hell they do. There's a lot of people in this country that just like are unwilling to give up their own sort of you know like sense of policy agenda, and put the good of the country ahead of them. And I would say the same thing. The same thing. And if AOC or someone like that becomes the nominee, you're going to see a bunch of people in the center basically saying, well, this is no better than Trump. Which isn't true. I personally I am prepared to vote and support. I'm prepared to support like literally any credible candidate who supports the rule of law and democracy. I would support or endorse Alexia Ocasio-Cortez. I would Mamdani, Gavin Newsom. I would vote for Liz Cheney if she was the only option vis-a-vis Trump. I am not one of these people who would allow perfect to be the enemy of the good at this point, because right now, um, we're at serious risk of losing democracy, not just in the United States but throughout the West. We are seeing a collapse of democratic culture and democratic legitimacy. And the only thing that's going to get us out of this is a broad multi ideological coalition that is prepared to put aside its policy differences in defense of basic human dignity, basic adherence to like the rule of law. But we're not there right now. And it's probably going to take it's going to take a leader that can punch through and build a narrative that brings people together. It remains to be seen who those people are. So let's talk about let's talk about fear a little bit, because people are afraid and they want to know what they should do. The thing is that's always the thing that you should always remind yourself of, and the thing that you should always do is guard your private life, um, and make sure that you know stay true to your morals and your values in your private life and in your professional life, because it's within community and within institutions that resistance happens. It's how we continue to remind ourselves that these things are unacceptable. It is a big problem that our politics are so nationalized in a sense, because much of what represents the most important politicking that has to happen right now is local. Our elections in this country are run at the local level. City and county governments run our elections. So running for local and county elections is very important if you want to keep our elections, free and fair, because that's who does the counting is, our local governments. And that's something that I think a lot of people have to remind themselves about, is that, local, like we don't think of city politics as important as our federal politics, but it is the cities and counties that run our elections, that count the votes. So that is something that we need to start putting more of an emphasis on, is looking at your community, looking at your city, participating in local politics, building strong ties locally, uh, communities of mutual support and mutual aid. Like, this is what you need to do. You need to look close to home, because you're not going to change what's happening at the White House, um, shouting into the void. So, I mean, that's what I'll keep coming back to when people ask me what they should do, is focus on who you are, who your value, what your values are, and live according to them without fear, and be as courageous as you can, because we need courage, and courage is just as infectious as fear. When people, you saw that, like, you could see it when Gavin Newsom started really aggressively fighting back. You could see the energy that started to come back into a lot of people among Democrats, once they saw like a fighter. Courage is infectious. And so I encourage everyone to be as courageous as they can, to speak up, to speak the truth, to insist that 2 + 2 = 4, even when power insists otherwise. We have to think about, the causes though of how we got here. And I think there's a lot of uncomfortable realities that many people of many different worldviews and ideological dispositions need to confront. I think centrists, in particular, and I would count myself as as a centrist. Like in terms of like if you just gave me a magic wand and let me implement various policies, I think you would probably count me as a centrist. But I need to be clear here about the problem with centrism right now is that centrism has become very technocratic in its outlook, very detached from the political, the political conversation. Liberal centrists have gotten used to this notion that people should listen to experts and let experts, decide policy based on evidence, based on science. And there's nothing like wrong. I mean, when I say it like that, I mean that sounds fine, right? And obviously science is a good thing, and obviously we should have evidence-based policy. I'm not arguing against that. But the problem is, and I write about this often, when I write about technocracy, and I've written about the you know like the human is ought distinction, is that the thing about like science and reason is, I mean, and obviously science and reason built the modern world. Science and reason is how I'm talking to you right now. Science and reason is how you put a man on the moon. None of this is in dispute. But the question is like there's a question that we often don't confront, which is why? Why did we put a man on the moon? Why did somebody build this software that I'm using to talk to you right now on the internet? What was the what is the reason? Why are they continuing to operate it? Like the um the technology is to serve human ends. It's to serve human passions. And so the problem with technocracy, this idea that we should leave it to experts to decide policy, is actually a very problematic stance that doesn't stand, in contrast. Well, it doesn't stand against the notion that expertise is important and that science is important, but it potentially stands in contrast, or in contention with the notion that what people want matters. And people on both the left and the right don't believe that uh, institutions are responsive to them. Uh, so shut up and let the experts decide is actually really really toxic stance for the liberal elite to take, because it just drives people into the arms of kooks like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The answer, I mean, the way that experts and you know thought leaders have to confront times like this is to realize that the way you get policies implemented and the way you make those policies durable so they last a long time is you get people to buy into them. There's this sense that we just need to gain power, pass the laws that we want passed, and then our job will be done. But the problem is that if you don't go through the hard work of engaging in debate, engaging with doubt, like giving, like justifying things to the public, that public is bound to, ultimately like turn against you, and you just end up in this situation like we're seeing now, where Joe Biden came in and he passed a lot of arguably amazing legislation, in terms of like regenerating domestic supply chains and focusing on the green energy transition, and that just all got like blown away like in a single election. So the question is like like what else do we do? Well, we don't just like browbeat people into trusting the experts. We have to convince people that these things are good. That they and then I obviously it's easier said than done when you have this giant propaganda machine that is serving the interests of people who don't want anyone to be convinced of these things. But that it doesn't change the fact that there is an attitude on the left that I've come up against. Um, there was this thing that I would find myself perplexed with. I don't know, like years ago, right? When I would find myself talking, I used to be a executive in Silicon Valley, and I do I mean I have to admit I found myself overwhelmed by how overly politicized the professional environment had become and was being promulgated by young people coming out of college, Gen Zers who made everything political. Um, and I can't tell you like how many times, I would say something and then be told that the use of a word was like problematic or like I mean this is not a good way to do politics. I mean there were even many like I mean there were many times where I know left-leaning professors in philosophy departments at prominent colleges in this country that were afraid of being canceled by their far left students. Like that's a real thing. And the right obviously has weaponized this and arguably blown it out of proportion, but like to pretend like there wasn't this uh like aggressive thought policing on the left is to deny reality because it was real. Like I've experienced it. I had been in situation. I mean, I don't give a fuck anymore. No one can fire me right now, so I don't care. But yeah, I mean, there is truth to the fact that the left got carried away with cancel culture, and not just canceling people on the right, but canceling people on the left for stepping out of line. There, that was a definitely like a real phenomenon, and especially like in the first Trump term, like especially like between 2015 and 2020, like leading up to COVID. Um, I mean, it was insane. It was insane. Um, I can't tell you like how many times like there were absolutely crazy things being said. I thought they were crazy and went too far, and I felt afraid to speak out against it because I thought like it was going to end up with some open letter posted on the internet that was going to cost me my job. Um, that 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 kind of culture, that kind of culture, what it certainly hasn't justified any of this right wing extremism, but it has been weaponized by them. But it's actually done something that's really worse. Is it's left the broader left, without any uh without any like muscle of argument of public engagement. Like one of the things that you would often hear from political feminists and political LGBTQ activists when we got into debates about you know same-sex marriage or trans rights. and and I support same-sex marriage and trans rights, like, and people who read me will see that obviously I consider the bigotry that's being directed against the trans community to be very, very scary, and outrageous. And if you are trans, or know somebody in your life that is, like, I can't imagine, like, the fear that you have right now. And my heart is with you. But, like, the goal must be, right, if you're part of the LGBTQ community, to want people to accept you, right? Um, and and I do think there was definitely a difference in how we saw the same-sex marriage conversation play out in this country versus how we saw the trans conversation play out in this country. Um, there was the same-sex marriage conversation, especially by the time that we had the Obergefell decision at the Supreme Court, was really one that really tried to, like, focus on empathy, right? Like, equal marriage, love is love, this kind of inclusiveness, like this argument that we're just like that gay and lesbian Americans just want the same rights as straight Americans. Like, that's a beautiful message, right? And it's one that's hard to argue against, and it's why they won the argument. It's why they changed the culture, because it's like the arguments against that are just like, well, like, I mean, how do you argue against that? Um, but I mean, when you get then you kind of fast forward, to the trans conversation. I mean, I was really worried about the kind of blowback that we might see once we got into the conversation around, you know, trans women and men in sports. And I don't want to, like, legislate on what I think, like, the right answer is there, but, like, when when you get people being canceled for transphobia, arguing that it's unfair, that people who they perceive to have certain biological advantages, are competing against them, and just say, well, that's transphobic. Well, I mean, it's kind of similar to saying that criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. There's things there. There's separate issues to be interrogated there, and it becomes very, very dangerous when you can't have those kinds of conversations openly. Um, and that kind of culture on the left, where and I remember, like, trying to engage a little bit on that, and often what I would get from very, like, politically activated people would be is like, well, it's not my job to explain it to you, go and educate yourself. This was like a kind of a standard reaction that you would sometimes get. um I mean, you can't you can't have a durable political movement that's answer to political disagreement is, I shouldn't have to explain this to you. You should have to explain it. I don't think I should have to explain it to Republicans as to why I should have the right to vote, but I'm prepared to explain it to them if I have to. Um, that this idea, like, that the argument is over, um, is always a trap for yourself. It's not a trap for the other side. I mean, the other side views it as censorship, but you're also trapping yourself. You're robbing yourself of building the muscle that's necessary to defend your values and to defend your arguments. You must be able to do this. This is a very, very important skill that one must have for democratic participation. So here we are, um, at a period of accelerating democratic decline, and we have a left that thought that the way to create social progress was through canceling, deplatforming, and simply explaining to people that they should go educate themselves, and listen to the experts. and while all that was going on, we had a fascist reactionary media machine that was, deploying itself against Americans who felt increasingly disconnected from the political process, felt increasingly like their government doesn't care about them, increasingly like their government isn't working for them, increasingly like the system is rigged. And the left essentially just abandoned this group of people and allowed. Did you guys see that the Teamsters union is like kind of like is like switching? It's like it's going to start like donating to the Republican Party like in the last few days. I mean, this is a. I mean that. I mean that is a consequence of the elitism that the left built for itself, and we should acknowledge that. And that doesn't make what's happening on the right like any more excusable. But it's also needs to be noted that they are weaponizing that dynamic. So the answer to, you know, I shouldn't have to explain this to you is yes, you fucking should. You need to explain it because there are more and more Americans that clearly need to be convinced. They need to be convinced. And increasingly younger Americans. Um so what I mean so I mean what where does that leave us in terms of our political way forward? Well, I mean I do think that that liberal technocracy is going to have to give way to more of a more populist strategy. I like I don't think that this current arrangement that the Democratic Party has with Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, who I hate to sound like a populist leftist, seem very very afraid of their donors and are seemingly too afraid to to stand up in the way that is needed right now. The only way that we're going to break through is by having politicians who are responding to what ordinary Americans are demanding, not being told, not being told what to think and how to think and let us take care of it. And so yeah, I think there needs to be more populism in a good way on the left, if we are to break through. Because right now the only people that the Democrats are talking to are relatively well-off people who live in urban centers. And the people who are not relatively well off uh just simply don't believe. Like, I mean, even if they recognize that Donald Trump and what he's doing is fascistic and authoritarian, I mean, the most that they're doing is holding their noses and voting for the Democrats. That is not a good and maybe there'll be enough people to hold their noses and vote for the Democrats in the midterms and hold their nose and vote for the Democratic candidate in 2028. But that's not sustainable against the authoritarian tendencies that we're seeing happen in our culture. The only way that we're going to reverse those authoritarian tendencies is by attacking the core factors that are leading to those authoritarian tendencies, which is that sense of detachment from politics that more and more Americans have, and that elite disposition is creating. So that's I mean that is to me like something that the that the political left is really going to have to get through its head. Um anyways, I want to look at the chat and see if does anyone have any questions or topics. I want to make sure that I'm responding to people. I know I invited questions. So I'm gonna look at the chat now. Wow, but people have been saying a lot of things. Um, Jules says what the right is really complaining about is that they can no longer use the N word and the F word for the LGBT community like the good old days. Um, Look, I mean, I'm not. I don't want to. I'm not arguing that the right is acting in good faith. I don't. I mean, that's not my argument. Uh, um, my argument is far more nuanced. To repeat my point, is that you need to have in order to have a healthy democratic culture, you have to have a healthy culture of political dialogue and political engagement, and that means like living those values, and that means tolerating dissent, including dissent that you find abhorrent. Like that's a necessary condition of living in a liberal democratic polity. That's not the same thing as saying that the right is acting in good faith, because I'm certainly not saying that. I'm saying the opposite. Um, what else? Does anyone else have any other questions? Just put them in the chat and I'll try to get through them as I'm scrolling through here. Um, One of the things that concerns and scares me is an attack on empathy and compassion. But without those qualities, we lose our humanity, Mary. I mean, I agree. Like, I mean, an important and necessary condition of a democratic culture is a belief in a higher good, right? That uh, it's a belief in community. It's a belief in and that the nation is sort of more important than the self. Um, and therefore, politicians and individuals should act out of interests in the nation rather than their own self-interest. Um, and I think that's, and I also want to like state this as this just also kind of reminds me of sort of another aspect of the political left where they just surrendered surrendered patriotism to the right. Um, like there's kind of been a bit more of a reversion. You're now seeing a lot more flag waving people on the left, right? Over the last year, like especially like there's been sort of a re-embracing of patriotism among liberals and people on the left over the last year, which has been good to see. But like there was kind of a time where if you were living in a city like San Francisco or in certain parts of LA and you had an American flag on your front porch, that sort of indicated that you were MAGA. Like it was like very uncomfortable to show an American flag, in sort of very sort of progressive communities of America. I always thought that was a very, very crazy and self-destructive element of left-wing political culture in this country, that just simply just allow didn't just like allow the right to own the symbols of the American state, but actively associated symbols of the American state with the right. Like if you do that, you're literally helping the fascists with their propaganda. You absolutely cannot allow, something like a national flag to become associated with one political party. And the left did this. They did this. It's like I put I put a American flag out, and I had somebody say, like, aren't you worried that people think you're a Trump supporter? Like what? Like, I mean, Like, I mean that you're literally just making it easy for the political right to accuse you of being anti-American when you think like that. So I mean I don't I do think that this element on I mean it seems like it's not as big of an element anymore, like especially among liberals. I mean I'm not really kind of paying attention to sort of far left discourse in this country, but I think there has been some correction on that. Um, what else are people saying here in the chat? I don't know how to pronounce your handle, but I'll read the Univuksak. Absolutely agree. Our messaging was verbose and attitude dismissive. Our messaging must be direct and clear to working people in all social strata. You get people as well. We have spent way too much time talking over these folks. It's absolutely imperative our presentation changes. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, like people talk about authenticity and the importance of authenticity, and it's really important. When we have political leaders uh, and people in offices of public trust, you know, people can just like they can just like see straight through the sort of the technocratic like language. Like people don't believe that you believe the things that you're saying. I mean, there's no passion with sort of this like kind of analytical detachment and practice talking points and this sort of method that the technocratic center has sort of adopted for political communication. It's become an entire industry too. You have like political consulting firms that make millions and millions of dollars selling their services to politicians to help them like sharpen their message and come up with their like three core talking points. I mean, this is insane. This has to stop. People want real people. They want to hear what people think. They don't want to hear what their consultants have told them to think. And people can tell the difference. Like we're our you know we our brains are sort of like wired to like kind of pick up on all these subtle signals, and that this is something that definitely needs to change. What else? A lot of comments. V for Violet says, I think it's critical that liberals push just as hard, if not harder, for Kirk's murder to be held to account at the highest possible level because he's ruined a lot of things for us as well, if not more. I mean, we certainly like should want justice for Charlie Kirk. Um, and I I mean, I think another important thing that liberals, something a small L liberal would want, right, is impartial justice, right? The alleged shooter is innocent until proven guilty, and deserves to have a full, vigorous defense before a jury of his peers, like anyone. But you know, if he is found guilty, yeah, he should face justice. And to your point around like the highest possible level. I mean one of the things that happens in the sentencing of criminals is there are prudential factors, right, that the judge will take into account. And this being a political assassination, like barring there being some sort of like mental health concerns that the judge would consider mitigating factors. You might expect, like, that the sentencing for something like this would be quite harsh, appropriately. Lynette says, I think it is interesting how we would evaluate people's politics on the continuum compared to how they would place their politics. This is something I want to write about at some point, about the left and the right. I mean, I've been saying left and right on this live stream. It's hard not to, but it is a framework of thought that, in some ways, is really. I mean, it's getting harder and harder to, um, like, use it as like, it's not a good way of like thinking about like how things like really work. And there's other, there's a uh, uh, there's other attempts, so like two-dimensional charts, like there's like the Nolan chart, which was done by this libertarian. Um, I mean, the truth is that, um, this moment is increasingly. I mean, it's increasingly being dominant. This is largely, isn't really a fight between like Marxism and capitalism in the 20th century sense. Like a lot of people want to continue to believe on both the left and the right. Um, that's not what's going on. I mean, this is actually a fight between people who want to return the country to what they believe is a set of more traditional values and a set of more traditional power structures, and social hierarchies. What the political right really wants in this country, um, is to return to, various cultural notions about like what they view as like the proper role of men and the proper role of women, um and the delegitimization of the idea that like, that gay and like lesbian, sexual orientations are valid and should be socially accepted. um and largely the opposition is uh, opposed to this, has a more, what you might say, egalitarian disposition. um and that is like, that's kind of the main, like, main cultural like undercurrent. And the scary thing is that, we're increasingly losing young men to this argument. And I fear that the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and I think there's some early evidence to suggest this, is that like young men in the United States and even beyond the United States, even in places like Canada and England, like we're seeing, Charlie Kirk's impact here, are increasingly attracted to the idea that we need to restore sort of, you know, pre-contemporary social hierarchies, because to them, you know, they don't they have this sort of, they're lost, right? They're, there's this sort of sense among young men that they don't know what it means to be a man anymore. They know, they hear all the things they shouldn't be. Toxic masculinity is explained to them. Um, there's this. I mean, there isn't a positive image of masculinity in our society anymore. At least on like within the sort of like, there hasn't been in the mainstream. And what we've gotten instead is this insane, you know, like I mean, extremely like dangerous answer to it. And you see this with, you see this on the right, this like emphasis on, this sort of like what this quite like fascistic vitalism, of sort of like the male image, and influencers like Andrew Tate, who and this just like absolutely like nihilistic sort of desire to just like chase like wealth, and this like attracts these young men to like crypto trading, and it's a very very unhealthy playing field that we've created for young men. And the rate at which young men are turning to like fascist ideology is accelerating. And I've been quite distraught when I talk to, people on the political left about this, about how hard it is to talk about this, and how angry feminists get when you talk about this. Um, I think one ought to be pragmatic about this, and recognize that to recognize that we have a crisis of young men, that young men increasingly feel excluded from society, I is like you see it all the time. You just see like, oh, boo hoo, who cares? Men of like, men have had their patriarchy for thousands of years. I mean, that's fine, right? Like you can do this like karmic moral accounting, but I mean, the fact remains that young men are becoming indoctrinated by far right ideology. And what are you going to do about that? Are you going to ban them from voting? What is our answer? Surely the left should engage here in a productive way. But there seems to be a belief that if you do that, that's anti-feminist. I think it's anti-feminist if we allow far right ideology to seize control of the youth, which is what's happening. Which means, by the way, that we're in for a really, really scary next decade. Because I mean, I don't even I can't remember. I mean, there's been no time in my lifetime where men under 25 were far more right wing than left wing. Like even like in the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, if you polled young men, they were overwhelmingly left wing, and now they're increasingly right wing. And if like the reaction from like progressives and from feminists is, well, fuck them, like I mean, that just seems like a very unproductive stance, because they're increasing, like they are going to be the foot soldiers in the fascist takeover. um I think this is a crisis that the left needs to confront, and it's very scary that it's a topic that's considered like, too off limits. um I mean, I think we should be really proud of the progress that we have made for women in society. And I don't think, and by the way, it's not blaming women. No one should blame women, for the crisis of young men. It's like that would be insane. And that's not what I'm saying. But there does seem to be this like this like place that people are stuck in their brains if like you admit like, that you admit that there's a problem with young men, that young men are feeling increasingly excluded from society, that is akin to blaming women. That is not true. We should want both women and men to flourish in this society. And it's critically important that the left finds a way to talk about this, because the rate of radicalization is accelerating now. All right, let's look for more comments and questions. Julie says, I think you're oversimplifying a bit. Feminists are men and women with a broad range of perspectives. Don't toxify words broad as I'm not trying to toxify feminist. I'm not, nothing I have said should be characterized as anti-feminist. I'm simply observing that, both through personal experience and what I've seen in public conversations, is that what I see as, in some cases, what I believe are well-intentioned and good and a good nature attempt to confront what is a social, what I see as a social crisis, is shouted down sometimes by some elements of of sort of the feminist movement as being, as being anti-feminist. Like, this isn't the men's rights movement that we're talking about here. This is a social phenomenon that is, like, actually poses a risk to our democracy. And the answer cannot be like, fuck the patriarchy. That's not going to resonate with these young men. It has to be like recognizing that there's a problem here, that there's a cultural problem, there's an economic problem, there's a political problem, and the left has to have an answer to it, and it can't just be check your privilege. Like, I think we've moved beyond that. Um So the right power movement wants to be in control, not to feel outnumbered by others and ethnicities. Basically, it is racism that never disappeared in a long process of white male control, ascendancy that has always been the hallmark of the Republican Party. Um, yes and no. I mean, I do think that our society is less racist today than it was like 50 years ago, like even now. Um, and I do think that it's potentially starting to get more racist and more hateful again, uh, as these movements gain power. I do think that the vulnerability to this reascendance of, of sort of the fascistization of society does have a lot to do with the failure of our politics to make people feel like their government cares about them. And it has when you feel like completely left behind, when you feel completely excluded from politics and from, a sense of having any consequence in society, then yeah, then you get like these right-wing influencers who are selling racist, bigoted, you know, uh reactionary ideology, and explaining to them that the reason they feel that way is this out of touch elite, people like me, like, simply don't care about them. I mean, we've kind of made that kind of like propaganda an easy sell, um, by practicing this sort of technocratic detachment that I criticize at the beginning of the stream. Um, Racism is like never gonna probably ever go away in our society, but I do think that it is possible to have a healthy, inclusive, democratic society. But it has to be like an ongoing fight, an ongoing process of democratic regeneration, and constantly asking ourselves, like, who are we leaving behind? Who are we leaving behind, and what should we do to help these people? And I do think that is something that, as we fight back against, the democratic decline that we see in our society, that effective politicians are going to have to do. They're going to have to find ways to speak to those people, and look, like, people's views can change, right? In like 1999, right? Like I think last year, when Bill Clinton signed the Defense of Marriage Act into law, right? Like 90% of Americans were against same-sex marriage. And then, nearly 15 years later, like nearly 70% of Americans were in favor of it. I mean, that's that is a massive shift in public opinion on a serious social issue in a single generation. So people's minds can be changed. You have to remind yourself of this. Um, a lot of the people who are buying into fascist politics today can be swayed back to the side of the light. They can. It's happened before. Like, we've seen it happen. Um, and that is why I insist that uh we have the fortitude to defend our ideas and to be persuasive and to be inclusive and to not talk down to people who are telling us that they feel excluded, and not to tell not to sort of like focus. I mean, we need to focus more on class today, in politics than we do on other identifiable traits. That's going to be very, very important. Ajot Sawi says, when young people in our society feel they don't have a path forward, there is no American dream for them. They are directed to lash out at the immigrants, women, black people, when there are a myriad of options. And the wealth doesn't just go to the 0.1%, then life satisfaction goes up. People like they have a place to grow and succeed. Yeah, I mean, this is I mean, yes, I mean, we I guess that's just kind of what I just said. I mean, we need as many people to feel bought in to our collective national project as possible, to feel like they have a sense that tomorrow will be better than today. Most people don't feel like that anymore. Most people feel like tomorrow is going to be worse than today. And in that environment, people are going to be really susceptible to being demagogue. They're going to be really susceptible to dangerous ideologies. And this problem is bound to get worse in the short term. Donna says, I was told in the 80s I was bitter for pointing out inequities in the workplace for women. In the 90s, I was told by young feminists that being angry was wrong, that everything has been fixed. No more misogyny. Now we're still dealing with all the same things that we were supposedly fixed. I mean, yeah. I mean, like, we're. I mean, this sliding that we're seeing is incredibly hard to take, right? Because we have made so much social progress. I mean, we've made amazing social progress in this country, and now we're seeing ourselves backslide rapidly. But again, um, the way that we're going to stop this backslide and start moving towards progress is not by wringing our hands. It's by standing up for these very defensible values. It's for standing up for women's rights. It's for standing up for, the rights of the LGBTQ community. By arguing for those things, not by just yelling like sexist, and not just by yelling homophobic, and not just by yelling transphobic, right? When somebody says I'm against same-sex marriage, you don't say you're homophobic. You say, like, why shouldn't gay and lesbian Americans have the same rights that you do? Like asking a question like that rather than yelling homophobic is going to be 10 times more effective at putting cognitive dissonance into somebody's head than just delivering them than just passing moral judgment with the transphobic, homophobic, sexist, or whatever word that you use. Like, that is, like, whether or not that's true or not, and it probably it's almost certainly true that somebody is homophobic if they're against same-sex marriage, right? The question is like is that good enough? Is it good enough to make that observation, or do you want that person to change their mind? I want them to change their mind. I want as many Americans as possible to buy into the notion that everyone should have human dignity. And so my strategy is usually to ask questions like that when people say things. Um, what else? Anyone else got anyone else's? Anyone any other questions here? Capitalism has never really worked without taking advantage of unpaid, underpaid labor of women and minorities in prison labor. Um, I think I find the whole I find the whole like socialism versus capitalism debate kind of frustrating, mainly because I don't really view capitalism as a ideology in the way that like that socialists tend to. Um, I mean, I think I hold a position that pisses off the right and the left equally, in the sense that like the capitalist system is a is it's an it's an instrumental to the the liberal system that we have. um I don't think that the system that we have today we don't have liberal markets today. Now we have corporate oligarchy, which is unacceptable. I think we need to. I think we need another trust busting period. Like I think we need. I think we're going to need to break up some of these companies. I think the rich in this country have way too much power. That power needs to be like I believe that we need markets, that we need competitive markets, to drive wealth creation. What I don't think we should have is markets that control our politics. Our politics should control our markets. Um, that I mean, but I do think that like to the extent that we allow there to be an entrepreneurial economy where businesses can make money and they can reinvest that profit in investments and stuff like that. I mean, I don't think that it's realistic to eliminate that system. That doesn't mean that we don't have like social welfare programs, that we don't have some degree of wealth redistribution. Like these are these are not. It's a false dichotomy to start getting into these arguments about capitalism versus non-capitalism. I mean, we need to have we need to rebuild state capacity in this country. We need to I mean, the healthcare system in this country is insane. I don't think the ability to pay for cancer treatment should be tied to your job. That's just like insane. I don't think that that's morally sustainable. I'll give you a good example where I think like capitalism would probably do a much better job than we're doing right now, and that's like in the frigging housing market. I'm really glad that California just passed SB 79, which is going to force cities to approve more housing. The truth is that a free market in California would build a lot more housing than we currently have right now. At these housing prices, like, are you kidding me? Like, developers are like constantly doing anything they can to try and build. Problem is they have to spend like 5 years in court, like fighting local communities that don't want any new development to be built. And that has driven housing costs up to a point where we have excluded the young. We have excluded people who would move from more rural and exurban contexts into the city to participate in the modern economy. They cannot afford to do that because a starter house costs like $2 million in Los Angeles. Like, I mean, like this. I mean, this is insane. This is insane. We've created landowner cartels, and it's actually like. I mean, this is an example where we actually need to let the market work more by like simply allowing the prevailing price of land to drive development demand. This is according to sort of Henry George's law of rent, and this is something that once again, like the left has been sort of dead set against. They're like, no, like the government should be building housing and it should all be affordable housing. But where's the money going to come from? And then even when you do try to build like government subsidized affordable housing, like in places like Berkeley, the locals still oppose it as like violating the neighborhood character. It like this. It has become this sort of like no win scenario, like in the housing market. And I definitely think that this is like another major thing that needs to be confronted. What else? What else should we talk about? Mary says, I've learned so much from what you've written about the tech oligarchy, Irvin, et cetera, especially the damage being done by by social media algorithms. Do you have any further thoughts on how we can address this? Um, I mean, I think there's like an increasing recognition among parents and maybe even now with some of the things that the governor of Utah, Spencer Cox, has been saying, that social media has. I mean, it's like it's. I mean, it's a big part of why we're here. It's a big part of why our politics is destabilizing. We clearly were not meant to be in giant parasocial relationships with each other. That's it's not what our brains evolved for, and our brains are misfiring in this environment of social media algorithms force feeding us things to sort of make us angry and create dopamine hits in our brain. I mean, I think it's going to be incumbent upon political leaders and everyone, quite frankly, to really start like continuously driving this point home that social media is unhealthy for our children. It's unhealthy for us. And I think in the same way that kind of like you know that kind of messaging ultimately changed our minds collectively about cigarettes, as an addictive, and nicotine as an addictive substance. I think it's just going to have to be that slow grind of people repeating what we all sort of know to be true, that this is like an unhealthy um an unhealthy thing for us. And it's I mean, it's clearly, I mean, you know, it's clearly driven people. I mean, Elon Musk has clearly been driven insane by his own algorithm. Like, he's captured by his own algorithm. Elon Musk is, in some senses, a victim of Twitter and X as much as he is a villain of Twitter and X. Um, he like it's kind of clear if you sort of like look at, say, someone like him. He's in a sense like a poster child for what social media does to your brain. He allowed that algorithm that force feeds you, what you want to see, and like and validate. Like, he was driven insane by his own algorithm. Like, literally. Uh it's sort of like, Shakes it's tragic in a Shakespearean sense. Um what else? Peter Stone says there was a great article in the argument about how developers are overbuilding senior housing because it's the only legal form of discrimination left. And there is a perception that seniors, aka childless residents, are better. They require less amenities and don't damage the walls as much. Well, I mean, that's just like, I mean, look, I mean, we, I mean, we, we become. I mean, look, we become a very like selfish and self-absorbed society, right? Uh, I mean, I want to hear the sound of children playing in my neighborhood again. I don't know. I mean, maybe other people don't. Maybe everyone wants to be a dink and just live the dink lifestyle. And uh, and never be bothered by the sound of children laughing and playing and running. But we've I think we've lost something really important in our society, and I think uh, to the extent that people see kids as a nuisance in our society. I mean, what can you say about the sickness of our culture? V for Violet says, just this morning, I was listening to a podcast where they're talking about the Trump administration having removed warnings about cigarettes and nicotine from health publications. Yeah, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised like this is like if this administration removes those warnings at this point. Um, it really is crazy, right? That Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is in charge of the Health and Human Services and the CDC. I think he was like saying something about how like how cigarettes had been unfairly maligned or something recently too. It's absolutely insane. What else? I'm trying to see if I missed anything. There's so many comments. Anyways, how long have I been going for? An hour and 35 minutes. Wow. Um, how does Nick Land's philosophy undergird so much of our situation? I don't think as much as anyway as you might think. Look, I here's one thing. Here's one thing too that like I guess that we also need to understand is the right today is not as coherent of a group as you might think. Um, one of the things that's all is like true, right, is you have this sort of like tech right faction that we associate with people like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and Mark Andreessen, JD Vance. But then you have this, these sort of more like communitarian right that's sort of represented by folks like Orrin Cass, and then you have like the Steve Bannon sort of Laura Loomer types, and they all don't like actually like each other as much as you might think. They in many ways they're all sort of like vying to kind of be the sort of the center of the right. And that's actually like, and you see some of that already, right? You see that with the Epstein stuff. That those as internal instability, like the fighting between Elon Musk and Steve Bannon. So that's like kind of a silver lining of sorts that the Democratic opposition can certainly use, right, to drive wedges and also to potentially go after some of the same voters that various parts of that coalition are appealing to without necessarily having to genuflect at the right. So the right today is not defined by any singular ideology. In fact, Trump doesn't really have an ideology himself. He's more of like a criminal mob boss. What else? Any other comments here? Hakeem Jeffries and Schumer and Hochul, by refusing to endorse Mondami, will be the death knell of the party. I do suspect it's because their fear of donors, lobby groups. Yeah, I think Jeffries and Schumer need to step aside. They're clearly not the leaders this moment needs. Um, I think it will have been unforgivable political malpractice if the Democrats don't use this shutdown fight, because the the government's going to run out of money on, I think, October 1st, and they're going to need Democratic votes in the Senate. I mean, assuming that they don't nuke the filibuster, which they might, to pass a continuing resolution to fund the government. The Democrats should be making very, very specific demands and being very, very public about those demands. I think one of those demands should be that Trump denounces violence on the right and calls for calm, and stops just blaming the left for political violence. That should be like a demand the Democrats make in exchange for their vote. I think they should demand that ICE stop wearing masks. There should be like a whole bunch of stuff that is like incredibly defensible that most Americans would agree with, that the Democrats should make very public demands for in exchange for funding the government. And it doesn't, and like, I have like no confidence that Schumer is going to do that. But that is absolutely, I mean, if it were me, like if I were the Senate minority leader, I would be like calling press conferences like every day and saying like, this is what Donald Trump needs to do if they want my vote. They need to respect due process rights. ICE can't be wearing masks. We need like we need to stop sending the National Guard into cities. I mean, things that like actually a majority of Americans will agree with, that are like really, really important for holding the line against authoritarian consolidation, should absolutely be used as negotiating demands in exchange for funding the government. And I just really fear that they're too afraid of doing that, and that's like insane political malpractice. So coming up here on hour and 40 minutes, I think I'm gonna start like winding things down because my throat's starting to get pretty dry talking for this long. Wow. When you talk for this long, it actually is a lot more tiring than you might think. I hear they're only making a demand for extending ACA subsidy. Yeah, I mean, if they try to just make this about healthcare, because the reason why like they're gonna they would make this about healthcare is because, and I'm not saying they shouldn't make it about, they shouldn't include the ACA subsidies. They should include that, obviously. But like they're just listening to their political consultants and what they think the pollsters are telling them they should focus on. This is just such a dumb way to do politics. Anyways, I think I'm going to wrap things up for today because this has been a long one, and I'll post the recording later. But this was this was a good opportunity to catch up. I haven't done one of these in a while. I'm glad for all the people who joined. We'll try to do it again. Thank you to everyone who subscribes to my Substack and Notes from the Circus. If you don't, I please do. I appreciate the support on documenting our democratic peril. So thanks everyone for joining me, and I'll see you soon.